Scientists breed sea dragons, but not by the seashore. The New England Aquarium is raising 18 baby sea dragons after a successful and rare breeding event. The baby dragons, who look too much alike to have names, will go on display this summer. For more than a decade, researchers at the New England Aquarium in Boston have been trying to breed some of the most elusive and enchanting fish under the sea. Lacy and delicate, sea dragons live only in the waters along Australia's southern coast, and their small habitat and limited range make them an ideal candidate for in-captivity breeding. Since 2008, the aquarists have tried to replicate the sea dragon's natural habitat. They have changed the temperature of the sea dragon tank to match the seasons of the southern hemisphere. They have adjusted the amount of light in the exhibit. They got a taller tank. None of it worked. I had kind of given up and thought it's never going to happen, said Jeremy Broad, an aquarist and galleries manager at the New England Aquarium. And then, out of the blue, Mr. Broad said, it happened. Last May, aquarium staff members discovered that a male weedy sea dragon was successfully carrying his mate's eggs. The aquarium announced on Wednesday that the eggs had hatched in mid-July, and that aquarists have been raising 18 baby dragons since then. It is the first time the New England Aquarium has successfully bred and hatched the weedy variety of the species, and one of about 15 instances of scientific institutions breeding sea dragons in the past 30 years. When sea dragons first appeared in aquarium displays, Mr. Broad said. The Birch Aquarium at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in San Diego celebrated the arrival of more than 70 weedy sea dragon babies a few weeks ago. Aquarists hope that breeding these fickle creatures in captivity will lead to fewer sea dragons being collected from their native seagrass habitat, which is under increasing stress from climate change and runoff from storms. Sea dragons, which are primarily of the leafy or weedy varieties, are not currently threatened, but the Australian government has strict regulations that allow only a limited number of them to be collected for public display in aquariums. Still, scientists are worried that the animal's already limited habitat may be contracting. They're a great, phenomenal animal. They get people's attention, Mr. Broad said. It's a way to get that message across and talk about these unique animals and the issues that they're facing. That is easier said than done, in large part because of the mystery surrounding their optimal, and very complicated, mating habits. Like their seahorse cousins, male sea dragons are responsible for carrying the species' eggs to term and can have more than 150 eggs attached to their tails. Their elaborate mating ritual involves male and female sea dragons mirroring each other, moving together as they spin upward through the water. During their dance, the female sea dragon transfers her eggs to a patch on the underside of her partner's tail, where he fertilizes and carries them. If the transfer is interrupted somehow, by competing love interests, for example, or even clumsiness, the eggs may drop or end up unfertilized. To protect the male sea dragon from bumping the eggs off his tail, aquarists at the New England Aquarium moved him to his own smaller holding tank to be monitored. Once the eggs hatched, the team gently removed the baby sea dragons and placed them in a tank stocked with highly nutritious food. The young sea dragons do not have names, they look too much alike, but researchers are monitoring their behavioral patterns. Today, the 8-month-old sea dragons are about 6 inches long and may grow up to a foot long. The aquarium plans to put them on display this summer. They're pretty impressive specimens when they're adults, Mr. Broad said. That first year, it's crazy. They're about 2 centimeters when they hatch and look like floating grape stems. They grow about 1 centimeter a week for several months. So what made this a successful pregnancy? The researchers were considering moving some of the adult sea dragons out of their display and into a larger tank to give them more space to float when they discovered the egg transfer had already occurred in the existing exhibit. 2 developments may have helped the breeding effort, Mr. Broad said. The aquarium had a surplus of live food to dole out. Adult sea dragons are primarily fed frozen food with some live supplements, and because of natural population fluctuations, there were fewer sea dragons in the tank at the time. It could have been eating at the right time and getting this influx of nutrition, he said. It could have also been pure luck and everything worked. Greg Rouse, a marine biologist at Scripps who was not involved in the New England Aquarium's project, said both food and space were likely factors in the success. Because sea dragons bond up as pairs in the wild and they don't hang around in big groups, maybe they get a little bit disturbed if there's too many in a tank with them. Dr. Rouse said. Food quality, he added, was certainly a factor. Even so, the hormonal synchronization between a male and a female has to line up perfectly. Moon phase and water temperatures also probably play a role in their reproduction. The success of one aquarium is a success for all, Dr. Rouse said. Anything that will take pressure off sea dragons, the better it is, he said. Evolution gone crazy. What makes sea dragons so strange? In the genomes of the bizarre fish that are related to seahorses, scientists found certain key growth genes were missing. Among the ocean's menagerie of bizarre creatures, sea dragons stand out. Relatives of seahorses and pipefish, sea dragons have long narrow snouts that they use like a straw to suck up meals of microscopic crustaceans. Instead of scales, the fish are covered in bony armor, and their backbones are kinked. Like their seahorse cousins, male sea dragons gestate a female's fertilized eggs in a pouch. They come in two groups of species, leafy and weedy. Leafies have elaborate branching appendages that make them virtually indistinguishable from the floating seaweed in their southern Australian habitats. Weedy sea dragons are more streamlined but are also more colorful, with purple stripes and yellow polka dots. Bill Cresco at the University of Oregon studies sea dragon genetics to answer one fundamental question. He and his colleagues want to know how the hell these fish came to look the way they do. We are just really fascinated by, how can you have an organism that looks like that? What has changed in the genome? He said. A study published in June in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences tried to answer these questions. Researchers sequenced the genomes of leafy and weedy sea dragons and compared them with other fish. The strange appearance of sea dragons made the team think that there might have been something unusual happening with their fibroblast growth factor genes, which are really important for development of things like teeth, which they don't have, or the shape of faces or appendage outgrowth, to name just a few, said Susie Basham, a researcher in Dr. Cresco's lab and an author of the paper. But when they zeroed in on the animals' genomes, the researchers were surprised to see that sea dragons were missing several of these key developmental genes altogether. I didn't really believe it at first, said Clay Small, another author of the paper also at the University of Oregon. While the sea dragons were missing these growth genes, their genomes were packed with repetitive sections of code called transposons. This sort of repetitive code throughout the genome was once called junk DNA, as scientists were not sure what it did. But transposons, or jumping genes, are actually capable of cutting and pasting themselves from one spot within the genetic code to another, preventing other genes from shaping an organism's traits. The researchers cannot say for sure if the jumping genes are responsible for the absence of the growth factor genes. There is evidence of repeating genetic code near the spots where genes are missing, which might point to transposon activity, Dr. Small said. But scientists will need more genomes from across the fish family tree to confirm a cause and effect relationship. In addition to studying sea dragon DNA, the team also CT scanned a weedy sea dragon in the highest resolution they knew of to ever be captured. The X-ray images gave them insights into the fish's paddle-like appendages, which the researchers now suspect are modified spiny growths. Axel Meyer, a sea dragon researcher at the University of Konstanz in Germany, says the study furthers understanding of extreme body plans. This is a poster child of the exuberance of evolution. It's sort of like evolution gone crazy, said Dr. Meyer, who was not involved with the study. The fun of being an evolutionary biologist is, you get to study these crazy animals and try to make sense of them genetically. Sea dragon DNA could give insights into how to conserve them, Dr. Cresco says, which is critical because they are rare in the wild and hard to keep in captivity. A single fish can cost upward of $10,000, and they have proven almost impossible to breed. Believe me, there's a lot of people that work with me that do not want to take care of them because it is a lot of work, said Leslie Matsushige, who has cared for sea dragons at the Birch Aquarium at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in San Diego for over 20 years. The fish are sensitive to fluctuations in temperature and light, requiring gradual shifts to mimic sunrise and sunset. Ms. Matsushige has even tried to match the tank's night light to the